Near the busy intersection of Dundas and Bronte Road in Oakville, Ontario, stands a church with over 2 centuries of history. The Palermo United Church, once Methodist, is more than bricks and mortar. It is the story of settlers carving out a community, of circuit riders preaching in log cabins, of rival chapels facing each other across a cemetery, and of generations who have kept faith alive. Before settlers arrived, these lands were the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, the Mississaugas settled permanently in southern Ontario after conflicts with other First Nations groups. 2 key events shaped the region. In 1793, the capital moved from Newark, Niagara, to York, now Toronto. And in 1794, Dundas Street was surveyed as a military and settlement road. By 1806, Treaty No. 14 ceded lands along Lake Ontario, including what would become Palermo. Surveyor Samuel Street Wilmot laid out Trafalgar Township using Dundas Street as the baseline. Among the Loyalist families arriving in 1808 was Lawrence Hager, remembered as the founder of Palermo. He purchased land at Lot 31, Concession 1, and by 1812 was hosting Methodist meetings in his home. The first Sunday school meetings were being held by 1816. The area became known as Hagerstown, but was later renamed Palermo in 1836. Post-war immigration after 1815 brought British migrants, Scottish and English clergy, and Irish Catholics. This created competition between American and British Methodists. Persistent friction led to demand for an independent Canadian conference. In 1828, the Methodist Episcopal Church formally recognized the Canadian Conference, with William Case as its first president. Lawrence Hager himself became a local preacher by 1815. Anson Green, a Saddleback preacher, reported that Brother Hager stirs them up as an eagle stirs up his nest. At that time, only Church of England clergy were authorized to perform marriages, so settlers often had to wait for a missionary or travel long distances to get married. Only after a long struggle was the privilege extended in 1831 to ministers of other denominations, such as Methodists. Circuit riders, or saddleback preachers, lived hard lives, often traveling thousands of kilometers each year. Many would be on the road for weeks at a time. Records from the Nelson Circuit show salaries of £50 per year for a preacher with a wife and family, plus allowances for horsekeeping, fuel, and children under 7. Their income was often supplemented by produce from congregations. By the mid-19th century, Palermo was thriving. Wooden sidewalks lined the streets before Oakville adopted them in 1849. Taverns, 2 of them run by the Hagers, served travelers along Dundas. A grammar school opened in 1842, one of the first in Upper Canada. Palermo also boasted a foundry, a chair factory, a creamery, harness maker, blacksmith, telegraph office, and general stores. Interestingly, Palermo was also the source of supply of charcoal, or at least the wood to make it, to factories in Hamilton in the early 1800s. Wood was cut on local farms, covered in earth and straw, and allowed to smolder to produce charcoal, which was then taken to the city in high box wagons to be used in iron furnaces, blacksmiths, and foundries. Often this dirty, time-consuming, high-risk work was done by highly skilled seasonal laborers on farms to supplement farm income, or a specialist called a collier. By the 1870s, the village had about 300 residents and was said to be one of the busiest villages on the old Dundas stagecoach route. Methodism came to Palermo through Reverend William Case, who preached at Hager's house initially. By 1815, Hager organized the first Methodist class in the district. A log cabin meeting house stood near Dundas Street by 1816. In 1819, a half-acre was purchased for a cemetery, and later the deed was expanded for a meeting house and schoolhouse. By 1824, a framed chapel was built at the back of the cemetery. It was known as the Trafalgar Chapel. In 1833, Canadian Methodists united with the British Wesleyans to form the Wesleyan Methodist Church in Canada. A minority of Canadian Methodists opposed the union, primarily because they wished to remain an independent church with an episcopal form of government. This caused divisions within the local Palermo church during the 1830s. The local Wesleyans had denied the local Episcopalians the use of their building in the cemetery. After a 3-year battle, in 1836, judges awarded the original chapel property to the Wesleyans. The Episcopalians had responded by building their own chapel by 1848 across the cemetery. For nearly 2 decades, Palermo had 2 rival churches facing each other across the graves. Both churches can clearly be seen depicted on this 1858 map of the area. Local lore tells of Lawrence Hager, hard of hearing and strong-willed, carrying his own chair to the front pew. If displeased with the sermon, he would stomp out, chair in hand, and cross the cemetery to the rival chapel. Whether fact or folklore, the tale captures the fiery spirit of early Methodism here. By the 1860s, unity was in the air. The rival chapels were aging, and the community longed for a single sanctuary. In 1867, Bishop Albert Carman dedicated the grounds of the present-day Palermo United Church, but it was not until December 1869 the brick church was finally opened. It cost about $4,000 and was praised as one of the finest country churches in the land. Originally it featured a steeple, but that was later removed. Fundraising was led by Dr. Anson Buck, Palermo's coroner and township reeve. His daybook records pledges from pioneer families with payments scheduled in 1868 and 1869. Locals even called it Dr. Buck's Church. The first funeral in the new church was for Lawrence Hager in January 1870. During his 86-year lifespan, he had lived through the entire founding era of Palermo. The actual land the new church stood on was not transferred from Lucinda and Ezra Winchell to the trustees until 1871, after the church was built. A further half-acre was given by William Laidlaw and his wife in 1875. Church services of the early years were markedly different. Men and women sat separately on long benches. Married women wore caps with long satin ribbons. At the 1933 celebrations, Mr. Englehart recorded that ribbons worn by Mother Buck fluttered more weirdly than any others, a childhood fascination during somber services. Much has changed since 1869, but much has stayed the same. The exterior has had repairs, but largely looks the same, minus the steeple and the addition of a community room in the 1980s. The inscription, "Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness," can still be seen behind the pulpit. Stained glass windows have been installed over the years and have never been broken. A Sunday school was added in 1925 and commemorated by a tree and a plaque in 1975. The church still uses well water, although it's not suitable for drinking. Near the church stood the parsonage at 3017 Old Bronte Road. Purchased in 1875, although some sources suggest construction began in 1868, it incorporated an earlier settler cabin from around 1819 and possibly a moved 1850s section. Renovated in the 1870s with Gothic Revival roofs and storm fittings, it served nearly 40 years as clergy residence and administrative center. The Ladies' Aid Societies furnished and decorated it, and many church events were planned there. In 1912, a new parsonage was built in Bronte Village for both Palermo and Bronte churches. The old Palermo parsonage was rented out and then sold in 1921 for $700. Remarkably, in 2013, Palermo United Church reacquired the property, but then sold it again in 2021. Though historically designated, it was later deemed to be unsafe and not repairable. It will be deconstructed with wood and stone materials, preserved for future use. The Palermo Cemetery remains sacred ground. Founding families like Hagar, Buck, Dorland, Fox, Gilbert, Englehart, Teasel, Smith, and others are buried here. A framed transcript of the original land sale, dated 1818, hangs in the church hall, though the land was not officially deeded until 1819. However, the cemetery has been in use since at least 1813, when Alexander Rose was buried on September 27th. The cemetery was never owned by the church itself. Care was always provided by local committees until the town of Oakville assumed responsibility in 1990. In 1997, a memorial plaque was erected by the Canadian Methodist Historical Society. Together, the church and cemetery are designated historic properties, reminders of Palermo's role in shaping Halton's spiritual landscape. In 1925, Methodists joined with Presbyterians and Congregationalists to form the United Church of Canada. Palermo Methodist became Palermo United Church, carrying its legacy forward. Over 2 centuries, this congregation helped establish more than 20 churches and chapels in the area. Ministers from William Case in 1812 to today's pastors and all of the ministers in between have left and are still leaving a lasting mark on the community. The congregation and community of each generation has paused to remember the pioneers who built the church by celebrating its special anniversaries. For many years, Palermo United Church was a 2-point charge with Halton United Church and the Nelson United Church, but today it stands on its own. The story of Palermo United Church is the story of faith, resilience, and community. From circuit riders on horsebacks to families gathering in brick and stained glass. From rival chapels to united congregations. This church has stood as a witness to history. More than 2 centuries later, Palermo United Church continues to remind us that faith is not only about buildings, it's also about the people who carry it forward, generation after generation. Looking for more great content like this? why not check out the Oakville Historical Society's website, YouTube channel, or Facebook and Instagram pages?